You're listening to the Southampton Dellivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a washing machine.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0. Blue fast shot. Oh my word.
Unbelievable. He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Dellivery Podcast, a podcast and newsletter dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans, and available right here on SouthamptonDellivery.com. My name is Matt Markstone. I am the host of the show, and no matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thanks for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. Before we get to my conversation with Chris Rann, you can find on Twitter at CRStig, who used to run a website called George Weah's Cousin, which we will talk about briefly as well. Before we get to that, I have a couple of things to admit to you. One, if there are little ears listening to this show, maybe this isn't quite the episode. Nothing too terrible, but definitely not clean. It's even marked explicit in iTunes on purpose, which doesn't normally happen, but that's the way it is. Secondly, we did not wait for the Everton match to record this. We recorded this on Saturday, and we did it because having talked to Chris and messaged him back and forth and kind of figured out what we were going to discuss, the Everton match didn't really matter. And not that we would not have, perhaps changed our minds slightly, or Chris wouldn't have had some different things to say. We did leave some room to come back and talk if necessary, but given the result, which you all saw or heard about or, are still hiding from, it wasn't there. And some of the things that we discussed in this episode with Chris showed up again in the Everton match. So I'll be very honest with you. I'm not a Ralph out person, but I am definitely moving towards the camp of he needs to be criticized and some things need to change with him. Not that there aren't a lot of other things that need to change around the club, but the results are not happening. The performances are not happening. And hopefully this comes to you and it's somewhat enjoyable, although I'm not sure if it will be. But I can tell you what I did enjoy, and that was talking to Chris in the first place. Chris is always a lot of fun. He's always brutally honest, and that's part of what makes him so much fun to talk to in terms of coming on the show, because oftentimes I don't want to say things. I don't want to be critical. I don't want to be, or I should say I don't want to be overly critical of Ralph or other players, and sometimes, though, they need it. And Chris doesn't shy away from that. So, like I said before, you can follow Chris on Twitter at CRStig. The link is in the show notes. George Weah's Cousin, no longer up and running, but we'll talk about that as well. And last thing before we go into the interview, I drank way too much on Friday night, talked to him early Saturday morning, so I apologize for the tone of my voice, but hope you enjoy it. Hope it's more enjoyable than watching Saints over the last 8-9 matches. But anyway, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you on the other side. I'd like to welcome back to the Southampton Dellivery Podcast, Chris Rann. You can find him on Twitter at CRStig. It's been a long time. You've, I think, 3 different countries from where you were last time, but welcome back, and how are you?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I jokingly told you before, best way to prepare for a podcast, 3/4 of a bottle of wine, 2 pints, and almost no sleep. So it's been a great weekend so far, and it's only 8:30 on a Saturday morning, so I'm doing all right. Better than Saints, I guess, as well. So there's that.
Yeah, I think some of the players have been having that before they play.
Yeah, I think my head also feels about how Che Adams' head felt after he got kicked a couple weeks back, but we'll be okay. So anyway, I've been excited to talk to you. It's been a long time, as we said. You've traded Dubai for the south of England, and I just have to ask you, what's it been like to adjust to that weather? And I guess you went via Ukraine, so maybe it wasn't so bad coming back to, maybe this is more moderate than what you were living through in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit strange because I've come straight back into lockdown. So really, it hasn't really mattered which country I've been in. I had freedom in Ukraine, actually, because they haven't really done a lot about COVID. And then I've come to the UK just as they went into full lockdown again. So I've just been sitting indoors at the weekends because I'm not with my family at the moment. I've been sitting indoors at the weekends, letting Saints ruin my life, basically.
Yeah, well, welcome to the club. And you now have to suffer that by yourself instead of with the Benali stand and everybody else in it in Dubai. So, I mean, are you missing that aspect of it?
Oh, 100%, yeah. I mean, the social side we had in Dubai was great. And of course, going and meeting the guys to watch the games meant it was always like a 6-pint Saturday. Mm-hmm. Now, because I'm sitting at home on my own, I might have a cup of tea. So I don't even have the warm embrace of alcohol.
Yeah. It's, I only know, watching by myself the anniversary, I think, of the League Cup final just passed, and people are sharing pictures. And I have, I think I have one picture of me watching a game with other fans, and I think it's only ever been 3 or 4 matches I've ever watched with other people, which is weird. So it's actually quite strange whenever I get to do that. But it there definitely is something to just kind of the group being there for support, to celebrate and all that stuff. And then especially when things go like this, you could just kind of want to be able to talk to somebody, which is why it's fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be able to do the show and do that. And I'm glad you're coming on to talk to me as well, because it's like I said, it's been a long time, and hopefully you'll enjoy getting to talk about it a little bit.
But yeah, I mean, watching the game with other people in a bar or wherever, that sort of tribe mentality naturally comes out, and you sort of can vent frustrations at each other. So I'm not sure whether I found the correct outlet for frustrations, and I'm just sat watching it on my own, to be honest. Yeah. But I'll get there.
Well, and I guess I'll just ask you this: Are you going to bring back the website as long as you're by yourself, or is that a far gone a thing of the past?
Yeah, that's a thing of the past. That's officially retired. I did, funnily enough, last week renew the domain name. I was going to let it die, but I still have email on it and stuff, so I did renew it. But there's no plans to have the website up ever again at this point.
All right. Well, if George Weah's cousin was live, what would the headline be? What would be on the front page right now?
Well, I think it'd be pretty bleak. I like it to always be humorous, so I'd like to think there would be some good sort of gallows humour in there. There would certainly be a lack of support for the manager right now. I saw a tweet, and I can't remember who tweeted it, so unfortunately I can't credit them, but the best tweet I've seen for ages about Saints, and it said Ralph Hasenhüttl is the best shit manager we've ever had. And it just made me laugh.
Yeah. It's you look at the recent run of managers, and I was actually just looking at the points per game, and it's not. I don't want to get into it yet, but it's not all that impressive, which sucks. But we'll come on to that. We do have a question here, and it's been obviously. For people who don't know, you used to run a website called georgeweahscousin.com. It was humorous. There was a lot of stuff going on. And then I think just as time went on, your priorities changed a little bit, right? You got a family and everything else. But Jimmy Lee Knight says he just wants me to ask you if you really like football. And I'm going to say still, so do you?
Yeah. So I know Jimmy quite well, and I know what he's getting at. We both used to play for the same football team on the Isle of Wight called Pletty Reserve, and there was a game where I was on the bench and I was stood there, and there was a interestingly shaped kink in my shorts, and the running joke became that maybe I was a little bit too excited to be playing football.
Right.
And ever since then, I mean, we're talking 20 years ago, and these guys still always ask me if I really love football.
Well,
that's an in-joke that has come through there.
All right. Well, I like it. And I always like to be let in on some of the stuff, because sometimes I've made mistakes in the past where there's been a question that I go, obviously this is some sort of inside joke. So I kind of sneak it in, build it up, don't show it to the guest, and then say, oh, so-and-so said this. And they're just like, who is that? I don't know. And it's like, oh, so I'm glad that this one actually is there. And it's a real thing, and you know who he is. And,
yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, probably Saints haven't gotten you that excited in some time, as we kind of just discussed.
Definitely not.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get your thoughts when Ralph first took charge of Saints. What were your thoughts initially on him coming into the club, and just given the managers that he was replacing and the kind of run that we were on, prior to that, how were you feeling when he first came in?
I was excited about his appointment, undoubtedly. He was someone I didn't know a lot about, but I'd certainly heard of. We'd just come off the back of Mark Hughes, which was a pragmatic appointment at the time, but was never going to excite us long term. And the appointment of Hasenhüttl felt like we were sort of going back to tide in bringing in, like, maybe not the highest reputation, but an exciting young European progressive manager. And since he came in, the initial feelings towards him were great. We'd gone from sort of dreadful football under the previous team managers to this exciting, high press, high energy style. And until the first 9-0, and I'm going to highlight the fact that I'm having to say the first 9-0, which is shocking. Everything seemed like it wasn't perfect, but this was a guy that was going to improve us generally. The first 9-0 came along, and actually it was the last time I spoke to you was when we got together after that 9-0 to talk about it. And I said he had to go at that point, and because I just couldn't see a way back from that. That's such a bad result. There's no excuse for that result. Effectively, you can't make any excuse for that. You can't say we had a player sent off early. It doesn't matter. At professional elite sporting level, you don't lose 9-0. It's just not something you do. You do whatever you can to make sure that you only lose 3-0 or 4-0, and you take that on the chin and say, we had a player sent off, we had to dig in, but we came out of it as best we could. So I said when we met last time, he has to go. And then I was quite happy to be proved wrong, because as you're well aware, he turned that around. Against all odds, it felt like he turned that around, and he took a season where we looked like we were in so much trouble and heading nowhere but down. He turned that round, and we had such a good finish to the season. And all of a sudden, everything was forgiven and all is rosy again. And it looked like, we've still got the right man in place, and I've been supportive of him ever since. Mm-hmm. Until recently, because what it feels like has started happening is that we're on a cycle of good spell, bad spell, good spell, bad spell, good spell, bad spell, which is fine. But the problem is, it's fine because we're not. In all realities, in any way you look at it, Southampton aren't ever going to be competing for the league title. We're just not. Unless we get taken over by a Saudi prince or something, that's just not going to happen. Right. So having good spell and bad spells, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing. I don't want to be labelled as someone who's just attacking him when he's, having a bad spell and it will come good. That's fine, and it might well come good. But when we're good, we're very good. But when we're bad, we are absolutely atrocious. And that's the bit that's really got to me. And are we really going to go for it? Is this period of good spell, bad spell acceptable? Do we accept that as a lot? Are we going to every year are we going to get beat 9-0? Are we going to get beat 8 or 9-0 at least once? Are we going to have a run of games where we just capitulate? Is that what we want from Southampton Football Club right now? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to use quite a strong word. I'm embarrassed at the moment. I'm embarrassed by the situation the club's in. He's making us a laughing stock at the moment. We're easily beaten.
Yeah, well, that is one of those things that does stand out, and it is concerning because up until now, I would think that even given some of the results, the players and the manager, everybody seemed to be mostly on the same page, and I should say that the players that weren't on the same page were moved out, right? Like the players that aren't in Ralph's plans have been kind of moved on, but he kind of hinted or mentioned after the Leeds match that the players kind of gave up essentially, and we've seen that. We were talking beforehand. The Leeds matches are predictable. Decent first half, probably won't score. as the second half goes on, we will tire and capitulate. And then, and Leeds just ran rampant all over us in the second half. And it was, it was disappointing and it was upsetting. And as you said, at some point, I think you're allowed to say that it's embarrassing the way the club is being handled. And I think that goes not just for the manager, but from the top to the bottom. And so I guess, is it the results that have changed your opinion of Ralph now? And because I'm guessing there aren't very many people on social media that are being vocal about wanting the manager out. And I think when you were raising the question and the method or the way you went about kind of raising that is when is it okay to ask questions of Ralph? And I think we've reached that point now where it's time to question some of the things. But what for you was kind of pushed you towards that?
Well, it's not just the results. Look, I've been supporting Southampton a long time. We've had some pretty terrible teams who have produced some pretty terrible results. It's the manner of the results coupled with the manner of the performances that make them embarrassing. Embarrassing to what? It's the way that we have a team now that, in the face of any sort of adversity, just capitulates, just gives up and says, "Okay, well that's us lost then." Old Trafford was a case in point. We had injury problems. Alex Jankovic is a kid. He's a kid who's never played first team football. He gets put in the team. He does something silly. Okay, it happens. When you're an elite level Premier League manager, when you have a player sent off early, what happens next is anything but you lose 9-0. To watch that unfold for a second time in barely 12 months, I was just in despair. I'm not an elite level Premier League manager. I'm not an elite level coach, but I know that in that situation, you shut up shop. You do what you have to do to limit the damage. And the 9-0s are. I don't want to beat him just on the 9-0s. I really don't. But the reality is that professional football clubs have 120, 150-year histories and don't get beat 9-0 twice.
Yeah.
We've done it in just over 12 months.
Yeah.
Managers have 30, 40-year careers and don't get beat 9-0 twice. And he's achieved that in just over 12 months. Is everything at the club his fault? No. There are other factors. Recruitment has been poor. The owner perhaps isn't as interested as we might like him to be. We've had injuries. Injuries, I don't take an excuse because everyone has injuries. Every club has injuries, spells of injuries. That is your job as a manager. You've got to suck it up and get on with it. And there's a problem for me, and this is the one I get criticised the most about when I bring it up with people, is we seem to have developed as a club a weak mentality. And what I mean by that is, as soon as something happens that goes against us, and it might be, we have suffered with bad refereeing decisions, it might be that when one of those decisions happens and it goes against us, we just give up. Now, that's the opposite mentality to what you need. When things go against you, that's when you should dig in and say, well, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to fight back and I'm going to win another way. We have a decision against us, and we've seen it's almost like the mentality of the team is, oh, well, that team's gone against us, so we can lose now and just complain about that. Well, that's not acceptable.
No.
And as far as I'm concerned, that mentality of the squad comes from the manager. And I worry that the adversity he's faced in 2 9-0s, etc., I think maybe it's broken his mentality, and that is now feeding through to the team. I take it all the way back. The last game we won was when we beat Liverpool at home, and the manager cried on the pitch. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't have the right to be emotional in that situation, but I'm not going to lie, I just lost a little bit of respect for him that night. Save that for behind closed doors. Don't do that on the pitch in front of everybody. If I was, as a supporter, was watching that, a little bit cringed and thinking, oh, what's he doing? That's embarrassing. Maybe some of the first team players felt the same way. And if they started to lose a bit of respect for him, maybe that accounts for the fact that we've not won a game since. 9 Premier League games or whatever it is, 8 or 9 Premier League games with only 1 point in. If the manager is showing a weak mentality, then that could go some way to explaining why the team is showing a weak mentality and isn't robust in those situations. You know, I don't buy that. I do buy that there is a problem with squad depth. What I don't buy is that our squad is not good enough to be doing better than it is. That I do not buy.
Okay.
There's a level of, you know, we discussed it before. A lot of Saints fans, and I think you summed it up brilliantly actually when we were talking before this. A lot of Saints fans have emotionally invested in Ralph Hasenhuttl, and that is blinkering them almost to not being able to criticise him when something goes wrong. But you know, for all the good he's done and all the good records he's broken, he's also lost 9-0 twice, and he's now responsible for our worst ever run of results in the top flight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those things can't be ignored. You know, whether you like him, love him, whatever, I like him. You know, I don't dislike the guy, I like the guy. But those things can't be ignored. And the other thing that really concerns me amongst all of this is that while we're on this run, the Telegraph is running a story saying Ralph Hasenhuttl has the safest job in the Premier League.
Right.
Now, how on earth, how can that in any way be a healthy situation when someone is so underperforming, yet the national news story from a paper that we know has close links with the club, so it's probably telling the truth, is saying he's got the safest job in the Premier League. Where's his motivation to improve or fix the problem? You know, I worry that perhaps his relationship with Martin Semmens, albeit it's good that the manager and the chairman or whoever have a good relationship, maybe it's a little bit too close, and maybe they're too friendly, and now there's no separation between friendship and business.
Yeah.
Because football is a business. You know, there's a real risk for us this season. People on Twitter don't seem to agree with me, but there's a real risk now this season that we could get relegated. Now, the commercial and the business impact of that happening is huge.
Yeah.
So, for all the people that reply to me saying, "Oh, well, who would you replace him with?" my response is simple. I don't know who you'd replace him with. That is a fair point. It's not like there's ready-made managers waiting in the wings. But do you just accept the same thing going wrong week in, week out and just leave it because there's no one else? To me, you don't do that. The saying goes, a change is as good as a rest. And for me, if I was in charge of Saints right now, if we don't win on Monday, we should go, because we're free fall into relegation, and I don't see any way out of it. I don't see that he has any way out of it. I thought we turned the corner against Chelsea, because one of my big issues with Ralph is he plays his way, and it's very exciting. It's great when it works, but when it doesn't work, he doesn't change it. He doesn't make subs quick enough. He doesn't adapt to the game situation. If I was an opposition manager and I was playing Saints at the moment, I would be saying to my team, right, what we're going to do, first half, we're going to let them wear themselves out. We're just going to stay tight at the back. We're going to let them wear themselves out, knocking the ball around, pressing us. And then second half, we're just going to blitz them.
Yeah.
Because they'll collapse. Because that's what they do in every single game. And, you know, Chelsea, I thought he turned a corner. At the Chelsea game, he changed the shape. He adapted the team. He shut up shop a little bit. It wasn't as pretty, but we got a good point. Then we went there, so I thought, you know, here we go. He's seen a way to change this situation. Then we went to Leeds, and it was just exactly back to how it was before. Play well first half, don't get anything out of it. Second half, collapse. If we'd have lost 6 or 7-0 against Leeds, we couldn't have complained. They were that much better than us in the second half. They were all over us. They, you know, Romeo made that tackle that was probably a goal-saving tackle. You know, we could have been destroyed again. So I don't blame Ralph completely, but I think right now he is one of the biggest problems at the club rather than one of the solutions.
Yeah, and I would say that when he first came in, it looked like he was going to be, you know, one of the solutions. And then, of course, we had, you know, a not necessarily a great run out with him initially, but the closing out last season when the playbook was implemented and that identifiable style of play, which I think excited a lot of fans, because like as you said, it is exciting to watch. Like when the team are clicking, like we've seen how good they can be, right? Like we've seen us beat other teams, and I understood when managers like Pellegrino and Hughes to an extent, extra defenders, and we all kind of agreed or thought that the team wasn't good enough to do this. And then you look at some of the improvements that Ralph has made in certain players, and things like that. And I was excited to see somebody that wasn't necessarily so reactionary to what other teams were doing. But I think Ralph is probably gone. I mean, or would you say that Ralph has gone maybe too far the other direction, where he is so dogmatic in his approach to the way football should be played that he's actually causing us harm and bringing some of these results on us that way?
Well, I think unless when you're a manager, unless you've got a £1 billion assembled squad like a Liverpool or a Man City or even a Man United, Chelsea, you can't be set in your ways in terms of how you're going to play, because you simply don't have the squad to do it every week in, week out. Mm-hmm. And you don't have the talent to know that your game plan will work no matter who you're playing against. So when we're playing certain other teams where it's not going to work, you have to be adaptable to say, like, today we're not going to play that way. And he did that against Chelsea. That's the most frustrating thing about it. Yeah. That's exactly what he did for the Chelsea game. And he got a result. And he was unlucky not to get a win. If not for Danny Ings' ridiculous tackle, he would have won that game. Yeah. And, there'd be a lot less pressure on him now from fans if we'd have won that game. If he wins that game, then the Leeds game doesn't become such a disaster. But because he only took a point in that game, the Leeds game became almost like a must-win game. Yeah. And, I know it's difficult, and I know people don't think that we've got the right manager in place, but my concern is that if the club feel the same way, at what point do we say enough's enough? Is it when we've lost? Is it another 3 games when we haven't won again? Is it when we lose the cup game? Is it when we're in the relegation zone, or is it when we've been relegated? At what point do they go, well, actually, maybe we're putting a little bit too much faith in this guy, yeah, and it's backfired on us? I don't know. My concern is really that he is a good manager. He clearly can get a team to play in a good way, but does he have anything else about him? I mean, for want of a better saying, is he a one-trick pony? Yeah. And if the trick isn't working, then there's no way out. And if the trick really doesn't work, then you end up on the end of a severe beating. Mm-hmm. The other thing is when I criticise him and people come back to me and say, "Oh, would you rather go back to Hughes? Would you rather go back to Pellegrino? Would you rather go back to Lord Gill?" No, I wouldn't. Of course I wouldn't. But what I say in return is those managers that took a lot of stick a lot earlier than Ralph has in terms of performances and points, they didn't have the best free kick taker in the Premier League at their disposal and a 20 season striker in Danny Ings. Like if you take those two things away from Ralph, where is this current Saints squad? Yeah. Where is his Southampton? Probably already fighting around the bottom 3. Yeah. He has 2 superb weapons at his disposal that a lot of Saints managers don't have the luxury of. So as much as he's done some very good things at the club, and he has, and Ward-Prowse is partly his responsibility because he has improved that player considerably. So I give him credit for that. I'm not saying Ward-Prowse was ready-made for him when he turned up. Right. But Ings was probably. Ings was a ready-made player effectively when he came. If you take those players away, you worry about the substances. Danny Ings is going to leave Saints in the summer. I put big money on that. And if we stay in the Premier League this season, where do we see us next season without Danny Ings up front? Yeah. It's quite worrying, especially if we have the same manager in place and he's not prepared to change the way he plays in certain games.
I want to go back a little bit. I'm not going to do the Twitter argument thing. Like, oh, do you want to go back to this or that? Cause I don't think that's not a productive conversation. Right. Like, but sure. I do want to go back to the mentality stuff a little bit. And when I look, and when I think back, and I could be wrong because, we remember things differently than they actually were. But if I think back to the team under Hughes and Pellegrino and Puel to an extent, I don't really remember us being like a super resilient team. I still felt then like the players would start to collapse as games went on. And I don't think it was normally like a refereeing decision or something like that went against us that caused us to do it. But we would finally allow the goal in after kind of defending for 65, 70 minutes. And then we would have a mistake, and then that was it. And we never looked like we were coming back into that. And when I look at the team, I guess the run out of last season, or the run in from last season, we looked what I thought to be a little bit different. But the players had time off; they had time to learn the system. They can do that sprint over a 3-month period especially if it's only one game a week. And so plan A was working and everything was fine, but Danny Ings kind of, hasn't been firing on all cylinders this season. The performance severely outperforming XG and all that other stuff, kind of signals that there's something not quite right with the approach, with the players, with the squad, with something. And so I'm not, I guess I don't know, like the mentality of the squad itself. I don't want to get too far from that. Do you think that is a Ralph thing, or do you think that's a player thing? And then how do you feel? Because Ralph obviously is a very emotional person. You can see it in kind of all aspects of his management. But like, how much of that is Ralph versus the squad? And
I think it's probably, of course, a concoction of the two. If you're a Premier League footballer, to a point, there has to be a level of self-motivation. You assume, perhaps wrongly, that when a footballer steps over the white line into a game, they have a will to win. They have a will to win that game, no matter who they're playing for, who they're playing against. But at the same time, it's the manager's job to make sure that they're motivated and that mentality is in the right place. We say this thing, like we've said it several times already. The amount of times we play well in the first half and then collapse in the second half, is that just purely that we run out of steam, or is that because the motivational chat at half time is just non-existent? Or is Ralph saying the wrong thing to them? I don't know. I think there's some, the worst thing that can happen with a manager is that the players stop buying into what he says. Now, if that's happened at Saints, it would definitely explain a run of poor results. And if the senior players, the key players like Ings and etc. stop buying into what he's saying, there's only one way that ends. Either we go down with a whimper, or the club acts and changes the manager. Player power is a very real thing. Mm-hmm. If the players give up on a manager, the manager's got no chance but to go. The club won't stand by. At some point, someone at the club will go, if we get relegated, this is a massive financial hit. So you can love Ralph all you like, but we cannot take that risk. I don't know the answer, Matt, is the honest thing I can say. Yeah. There is something wrong with the mentality of the club, and whether that's coming from the boardroom, or it's coming from the manager, or it's coming from the players themselves. Is it coming from the fact that there's been contract nonsense for ages involving two key players? Are the other players now going, well, what's the point in trying, because when Ings and Bertrand go in the summer, we're going to be even worse. Mm-hmm. So they've stopped. Their motivation has gone. I'm probably quite a pessimistic person, I guess, but I've said from day one, Ings isn't signing that contract, because there's no logical explanation why it would take this long if he wanted to sign it. So every time the local journalists will come out and say, oh yeah, it's not signed yet, but we know it's close. Is it? Well, it's not, is it? Because they've been saying that for months. It doesn't take long to sign a contract or meet somewhere in the middle in a negotiation. Mm-hmm. if I was Danny Ings, if I was him personally now, and, you know, Southampton fan growing up, etc., whatever, he's 29 years old, effectively any transfer would be his last big financial gain from football. Saints are playing badly, free falling. Would I be signing the contract? Not sure I would. You know, he'll be waiting to see who shows an interest in the summer, and if it's anyone better than us, then he'll go. I'm absolutely certain of it. Bertrand, I think, is a different matter. I think Bertrand is probably at his last, at the best place he's going to be now.
Yeah.
You know, his career isn't going to go any higher than it is now. But Ings has still got one shot at his going higher. So I really couldn't blame him if he goes. And I think that sort of thing does affect players mentally. Does affect, you know, the situation. Maybe the injuries are affecting them. Maybe the fact that they're mentally exhausted because there's so many games. You know, we play a fast-paced game. You know, that affects them mentally as well as physically. I don't know. If something isn't right and something has to change, or it just isn't going to improve. Right.
And if you think about Ings, like he wants to be on a plane this summer, right? If he's not going to the Euros, he's probably going somewhere else. And I think that is, I'm not going to say that's unfair for him to react that way. And as you said, he's got to think about his life and what happens to him after this. And he's got really one more shot. If he wants to get in the England squad, this is probably the best chance he ever is going to have to play and represent his country at a major tournament. And so you can't be mad at him for that. And sometimes I think, you know, Ralph's system is, as you said, it's intense. It's demanding both physically and mentally. And if you look at kind of what Ings is being asked to do week in, week out, and I mean, he did give away the penalty against Chelsea, but that was also our striker, you know, defending for all he's worth, basically, in our own box, which is something he does. He tracks back a lot. And I think all of that goes fine when you're winning. I think players will do that stuff when you're winning, but when the results stop happening and you are asking them to put in that much effort and kind of be both mentally switched on and physically ready to do that to yourself. Because I mean, it's a lot easier to just kind of sit in two banks of four and kind of, you know, just shuffle side to side and head the ball away. Like that takes some energy, but not nearly as much energy as what we're doing and what we're asking the players to do. And I think when things start to go wrong, it's easy to see that players go like, you know, this might not be worth it. And
the problem with the way we play is that to work, every single player has to be completely and utterly committed to what the next move they make is. So, you know, for the press to work, all of the players on the pitch have to know exactly what they're supposed to do in that situation, and they have to execute it. And they all have to do it at the same time. The second one or two of them, their mentality drops or they don't concentrate and they don't do it, that's when these huge gaps appear and teams just break and tear us to pieces. And I think that's the side effect of being on a poor run is that there's a vicious circle. So the poorer the results are, the more pressure the players feel and the more those gaps appear, which is why he should be looking at going, well, okay, let's have a couple of games where we don't play that way, where we take the pressure off them, we play a more rigid formation, and we just play defensively and just soak up the pressure, pick up a couple of points, and all of a sudden everyone's mentality improves. You know, it's just when you're in a rut, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again and just hoping it gets better, because it isn't. The saying is something like madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah,
and that feels like what we're doing at the moment. You know, add to that, you know, little things I don't really want to criticise Ralph on, but at the end of the day, he picks the team. Like, why have we got fullbacks on the bench and Bednarek at right back? I don't get it. I don't get the mentality behind that. Bednarek's great, a decent centre half. He's not a fullback for anyone's money. He's not a fullback. So if you don't trust the kid, then why did we let Valerie go? There's so many odd decisions that happened at our football club over the last 2-3 months, or 2 months really. There's been so many odd decisions made that I just can't help feeling there's something going on behind the scenes that perhaps we don't know about. And perhaps it gives the likes of Ralph Hasenhüttl and the players even a bit more of an excuse as to why everything's gone wrong. You know, maybe is Ralph being told players have to go? You know, was he given a choice about Valerie going on loan and Vokins going on? Because it seems like a very odd decision to me to make as a manager to let your backup fullbacks go out on loan when you don't and not bring any in. So, you know, was his hand forced in that respect? And that's why perhaps his motivation's dropped. And that would be a reasonable thing for that to have happened. You know, if his hands are tied and his squad is being sort of dismantled in front of him, you can't play Premier League football with two fullbacks. It doesn't work. And especially the way we play,
right?
Players get injured because it's high intensity. There's no surprise. The injury should be of no surprise to anybody because of the way we play. And the games just come thick and fast at the moment. You know, I think one thing that Ralph got very right was we were one of the best prepared teams for lockdown. So when lockdown happened and then they brought the football back, we were one of the best teams that adapted to it. You know, I think we lost one game at the end of last season, you know, behind closed doors.
Yeah. And
we just looked really good and we adapted to it perfectly. And then the start of this season, we had a little wobble, but then we were good again. And I wonder if we just got a little bit lucky in that we adapted to coming out of lockdown better than other clubs did. And now other clubs have started catching up and they're now better suited to it. I don't know. I don't want to overanalyze it because you know, just drive yourself mad. But I can't fathom how we've gone from looking so good. You know, we were top of the league. It sounds crazy now. We look so good, and we look so bad.
Yeah.
And I don't say that a few injuries does that. I just don't. They don't help by any means, but they don't create this sort of cacophony of pettiness that we've had to suffer for the last month. You know, people I always put on there, we haven't won a league game for 8 games. And people always reply, but we've won 3 cup games.
Right.
Well, sorry, but Shrewsbury are in League One. Arsenal didn't put their best team out and didn't really try, and neither did Wolves. You know, if either Arsenal or Wolves had approached those games differently, we wouldn't even have that to fall back on.
Right.
One of them would have knocked us out. Both of those teams beat us the game after in the league. You know, the FA Cup is the one thing that's left in our season, and I just think we've been quite lucky to have got as far as we have. You know, would you put money on us beating Bournemouth in the quarter final? I'm not sure I would at the moment.
Yeah.
It's a difficult situation because we'll play Bournemouth and they'll be up for it and they'll try and win. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
And that's a different situation to the games of Arsenal Wolves were. You know, the cup games have to be sort of treated almost differently. It'd be great. You know, this may be, I'm sitting here now sort of giving Ralph a bit of a hard time, and it's still possible he takes us to an FA Cup final. But, you know, that doesn't always swing things. Peel took us to a League Cup final and still gets spoken about, you know, with such disdain. It's actually quite crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I'd love him to get us to an FA Cup final, but what I don't want to happen is he gets us to an FA Cup final, we get a player sent off in the first 5 minutes and we get beat 9-0.
Yeah.
Just like on the biggest stage in the world, you know.
Yeah. Well, and the I mean, you want to think about it in terms of like a relationship, right? Like if you're sticking around just because of the cup run, like that's like staying in a really bad toxic relationship because the sex is good. Like it's not a great thing. And I don't mean to be, I don't think that's too crass for hopefully anybody listening, but, and I mean, I think you know this, but I don't know where to go after Ralph. And I'm not asking you to tell me, you know, who gets the job. And I'm still maybe in the boat where I think he's the best manager we can possibly have. But I definitely think there are things at the club that do not make sense, that are they're not helping. And I think it's I don't want to put this all on Ralph, but he's definitely got, in terms of injuries, some of that is on him. we watched how many minutes Danny Ings played, game after game after game, not coming off, making, one substitution, a second substitution in the 92nd minute, guys just being run out. And they have all the data. They have to be looking at how these guys' bodies are reacting. And that when you overtrain, at some point, the risk of her injury becomes far, far too great. And I mean, Arsene Wenger 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago was saying, the guys are in the red zone. They can't play. They're not, we have to rest players. And so that stuff's been around for a long time. And that's been one of those things with Ralph that I think the style of play, the lack of being willing to rotate players is causing some of these things. And just looking, just at his managerial history, the 47 players he's used at Saints are more than he's used in any other squad. So this is definitely part of what he likes. He doesn't like to use a ton of players. He's now also been in charge at Saints for more matches than he's been at any other club. He has his lowest points per game return at Saints versus any other club. So, but it's not necessarily miles lower, but it definitely is. It is lower. And so I think you can see some of these things. We've had 40 losses, only 37 wins under his management. And I think the players are, just being pushed, I think, to the limit, and him not changing things. I think that's part of it. And, Romeu breaks his ankle or breaks a bone in his ankle. That's not necessarily on Ralph, because that's a bone injury. But you look at Ings, you look at Kyle Walker-Peters, you look at the number of hamstring injuries that Djenepo has suffered and everything else. And it's one of those things where you have to look at the manager and say, like, you have to do something about this, because you can't just, like you said earlier, continue to do the same thing and expect that it's just going to turn out okay, because it's obviously it's not happening. Just like, points per game from Ralph all the way down to Pochettino. Ralph averages 1.35 points per match. Hughes only 0.96, which made me laugh. But Pellegrino 1.09, Puel 1.38. Claude Puel, more points per game than Hasenhüttl, barely, but there. Koeman 1.64, Pochettino 1.45, but obviously inherited a much different squad. A squad coming up from the championship, so you give him a little bit of leeway there. But go ahead, sorry.
The crazy thing, Matt, is Pochettino used to get so much more stick from fans and not having a plan B. Yet, I can't believe anyone would argue with me that Pochettino isn't a better manager than Ralph Hasenhüttl. I think his record since he's been at Saints has proved that he certainly is. So this whole emotional buy-in with Ralph that fans have got, it really, really means that he gets away with stuff that previous managers didn't get away with.
Right.
In terms of how they treat him and how they speak about him. It's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting psychological thing that's happened where, technically his record, as you just read out, isn't that much better than some other Saints managers, but the vision that has been created of him in the fans' eyes is so much different. And a lot of that is because the football is attractive to watch. And, football is an entertainment game at the end of the day. People like to watch entertaining football. So that's why the positive view of him is probably overloads other managers. But Pochettino played attractive football as well, and he got loads more of it than Ralph gets. So is it just about the personable nature that he has and the way that he interacts with the fans? And he always comes and does the jazz hands at the end of games. Is it just almost like parlour tricks of people that get people on side? There's interesting psychology to it. I think because I'm like almost emotionally retarded, I just don't buy into it, Brad. I don't things like that don't bother me as much about, a lot of people were sort of thought it was amazing that he cried on the pitch. For me, that was something that was a little bit cringeworthy that I didn't want to see from the manager. Other people thought it was, oh, look how much he loves the club. I didn't quite see it like that. So everyone has different opinions and how things have reacted. But I do think he gets away with a lot of stuff that previous managers wouldn't have got away with in the way he's spoken about. But to sort of bring it back to what you said about who comes in, if you get rid of Ralph Hasenhüttl, who comes in, I think we have to be real here. I don't think Saints can afford to sack him even if they wanted to. So I don't think there's any danger that they are going to sack him. And, part of me still thinks he's probably earned the right to try and finish this season. But if, come the end of the season, we have not been anywhere close to being relegated, then I think the club would have to take a serious look at whether he's the man to take us forward. And maybe he's reached his glass ceiling as a Saints manager. And in terms of who you replace him with, for me, there's no obvious candidates, of course, but there's one available manager who would instantly make us into a better side, and that's Rafa Benitez. Could we afford him? I don't know. Would he be interested? Well, maybe not, but he did manage Newcastle, so there would be a chance, I think. And then the other options I would look at is, why not give someone like Steven Gerrard a go? The job he's done with Rangers in Scotland to turn them from also-rans to dominating that league, it can't be sniffed at. Why not give someone like that a go? Why not give Lampard a go? Lampard wasn't doing a disastrous job at Chelsea before he got sacked. Chelsea sacked you for anything. Mm-hmm. So I don't buy that there's no options out there. I buy that it's not the easiest thing, and there will be a gamble on whether you're replacing somebody that's actually better than Ralph Hasenhüttl, unless it's Benitez. I'm not going to listen to anyone who tells me Benitez wouldn't be a better option. That his CV speaks for itself. Yeah. But Gerrard, Lampard, of course, would be gambles. But what do you do? Do you sit there stubbornly and say, "Oh well, there's no one better, so we'll just stay as we are and just watch the club slowly go down the pan"? I say all this with the caveat that I will be as happy as anyone else if we beat Everton on Monday and we go on a little run and he turns it around and we all go, okay, we had a blip and all's forgiven and we go back to normal. But if we speak again in a year's time and we've just been beat 8-0 by Man City and we're on a terrible run again, what's the point? Are we just going to go round in circles? Mm-hmm. That's the way I look at it. I know it's not popular often with people, but I'll be honest. If I was chairman of Saints, I'd have sacked him straight after the Leeds game. But that's me.
Yeah.
Everyone's different. Like I said, whether the club can afford to sack him is another matter. But who knows? Try and be jolly about something.
Yeah.
It'd be a shame. It would be a huge shame if he ended his time at Saints on a negative note, because I do think he's done good things. I do think he's brought a lot of joy, a lot of entertainment to the club, and I do think he's a decent guy. His intentions are definitely good. Yeah. But intentions are one thing. Delivery is something different, and it may be that, bringing it back to mentality, it may be that his mentality just isn't strong enough. Maybe he feels the pressure. Maybe he's affected himself by it. If you're a manager and you lose 9-0 twice, that's got to affect you. That's got to affect the way you approach the next game. If he's on the touchline and we're playing Man City and, Bednarek gets sent off after 2 minutes, how is that going to affect him in terms of his mentality? He's going to be like, well, this could be 10 or 12-0 the way Man City is playing at the moment. Yeah. If we give them a match, it's got to be either he's got to change his approach in some ways. He's got to find something different. He's got a different way of speaking to players or something, because something's got to give. I don't want to be sat here in another sort of 2 weeks time and we've another 3 games have gone by and we haven't got any points. Yeah. And still people will be on Twitter going, keep the faith with Ralph. It's like, well, keep the faith is a sort of non-plus statement. I used to put it at the end of all my blog posts, but it was for me. Keep the faith meant with the club, as an entity, not with one human being. No man is bigger than the club. No man should be guaranteed their position at the club if things aren't going right. And that's where I think the club needs to be a little bit more pragmatic and say, if things aren't going right, then unfortunately, as disappointing as it will be and as difficult it might be a conversation to have, then maybe it's time to change something.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one more time to hit on the relationship aspect of this. If you're staying with somebody just because you don't see anybody else out there better for you at the moment. It's probably not a great thing, right? Like I'm, you know, I think that Ralph Hasenhüttl has done, as you said, good things for the club initially. And I think that if you look at maybe what the 9-0s and some of the other things that have happened under his or during his time at Saints, you can see it on the touchline. You can see the changes in his face and his reaction. And he is somebody who definitely wears his emotions kind of out. They're out there. And, you know, sometimes he talks after matches, and you can just hear the dejection in his voice, and you can hear the, you know, those swings. And I think that can, like, he can be a great manager and still have it not work with this group of players. You know, the managers tend to run their course over a couple of seasons, 2-3 seasons with a team. And then you just need a change. It doesn't even need to be that it has to be a quote unquote better manager for the team to improve. Right. Like, even if you bring in somebody like Lampard or Gerrard, who maybe haven't proven themselves, it just could be that injection of new ideas is enough to, you know, just a different energy around the club might be enough to just kick the guys into gear a little bit. And I think Ralph initially kind of did that. You know, his enthusiasm, that all of that energy that he had, I think really helped the club. And I think maybe over a time period, it just is too much. It is, you know, it can wear on you. It's like, you know, you meet people who are great to hang out with and do all that stuff for a while, and you're like, you know, I can take this guy, but only, you know, in small doses. He's great at parties. I don't really want to deal with him on a day-to-day basis. And if that's the way it is, I think that's fine. I don't think that anybody has to, like, you know, Ralph doesn't have to be a terrible manager or a terrible person to just have it not work out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with wearing your emotions on your sleeve, that's great when the team's winning and you're, you know, punching the air and you're running towards the supporters and you're raising the hands up, and that's great because that works in your favour and everyone gets behind you. But at the same time, when something negative's happening, you've got to take that on the chin. That's now going to be used as a stick to beat you with. Like you say, you're 100% correct. Not only, you know, he managers, when we've lost the game or we've had a bad result, his face needs to be stony and distinct with what he's saying, not visibly showing that he's, you know, gutted, because it just sends the wrong message. You know, so many managers in the past have been a lot better than that. You know, Mourinho's very good at it. He can show his emotion at times, but he can also be so, you know, deadpan, and when he's lost the game, he doesn't give anything away. And I think that there's nothing wrong with showing emotions, but sometimes you need to try and keep that in check. And you're right with what you said. He's gone from being, you know, a sort of larger than life character almost, to being someone who stood on the sidelines and just looks lost.
Yeah. And,
you know, that can't be a good situation for the club or for him personally, because that's not a healthy position to be in.
Right. Well, we kind of have made our way through a lot of the questions that were sent in just over the course of our conversation, but I just want to quickly kind of read them out. Al Capone 156 says, when Ralph first came in, he started getting the best from some players who were below par. Redmond, James Ward-Prowse, Bednarak. And we kind of talked about it. The rest of the question goes, how can he inspire the guys to improve their play, have some confidence, and not give up in the second half? I know that's pretty broad, he says. But I think we've kind of discussed that, and I'm not sure. I think if, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think kind of what you, I think, have hinted at is it might be that Ralph has tried that, and that his actual approach isn't succeeding with the guys at this point.
I think when it was working, the players were sort of buying completely into what he was saying. And I'm worried that perhaps that isn't the case now, and because they're not buying into what he's saying. And, you know, it must be, for those players that walked off at Old Trafford, some of them would have played against Leicester as well. You know, they're walking off, they must be thinking, I don't believe for a second that some of the players in that game weren't thinking, well, why is he not changing the shape? Why is he not telling us to do this? Why is he leaving things as they are? You know, I know he had kids on the bench, but I wonder if the players now are questioning his decisions and as soon as that happens, they're not gonna perform for him, and they're not gonna improve under him, because they're just not listening to what he's saying. I think something's lost in translation, perhaps, at the club, and I'd love to be able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but the reality is I think it's probably a combination of many things.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Al Capone 156 also asked, he says, talked about contracts a little bit, but how big of a role do you think Ings and Bertrand not signing, like what message do you think that sends to the rest of the players in the squad?
Well, I certainly think it doesn't help. I mean, you would like to believe that someone who's a professional athlete playing, elite level football wouldn't be affected by such things and wouldn't know that they've got their job to do. But probably are, unfortunately. And I think, Ings is, let's not be around the bush. Ings is the star of the team, if you like. Mm-hmm. He's the LeBron James of the team, or whatever you want to say. He's the number one focal point that anyone else outside looking in is looking at. And Bertrand is one of the senior pros, probably one of the leaders in the dressing room.
Yeah.
So it's two people that, if there's a chance they're not going to be here next year, other players can be thinking, well, that's going to be a big problem for us, because one, they're our friends. Two, they're the people in the dressing room that we rely on to, keep spirits up and keep the team going and have huge experience. If they go and we've got two kids come in, it's another battle. So I do think they're affected by it. I don't know. I mean, Redmond's an interesting one. I mentioned, he seems to be getting a lot of more game time than perhaps he deserves at the moment, based on form. I'm not a Redmond knocker usually, but I think there's something weird about that. Yeah. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things going on that players will be affecting players. I think if you're Kane Ramsey, I think if you're a young right back sitting on the bench while a centre half plays right back, I think you worry about things like that. I think if you're the best striker at the club and you're on the bench against Leeds and Redmond's up front, I think you worry about that. I just find, just everything about the decisions being made around the club are strange at the moment. And I think while contracts may be affecting them, I think that's probably just sort of one dent in the problem.
Yeah.
I think it's many things, a combination of many things, and the contract is just another thing that's weighing over the club like a dark cloud.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll be very surprised if the Ings one ever gets signed. The Bertrand one may well do. I think the Ings one is probably lost.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we can acknowledge that there are other things going on around the club that are not making Ralph's life any easier.
Of course.
And yeah, and some of the patrons of the show written in, we talked about it, and I just want to acknowledge that. But we agree. But I guess, I mean, how much do you miss Gaston Ramirez? Just to finish this off, do you miss him as much as Dave McNally does?
I don't miss him at all. Dave McNally is a former military colleague of mine, and he's a Middlesbrough supporter, so he also suffered Gaston Ramirez. So it's kind of he's having a little joke about that.
Yeah.
No, I don't miss Gaston Ramirez at all. He was rubbish.
Yeah. Well, he'd fit right in at this point. With the way we're playing.
His mopey, sulky sort of demeanour would probably suit us quite well at the moment.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Chris, I just want to say thanks, man. Like I've been looking forward to this. I'll be honest, I drank entirely too much last night, but I was still excited to get up this morning and talk to you about this. And I hope that I hope it made a little bit of sense in the way that I've asked questions or whatever. And if I didn't, I apologize. And I got to get my life together and do it again sometime.
No, thanks to you too. I really wanted to come on. I know we spoke a little while ago about coming on because, there's only so much you can say in sort of 140 character tweets or whatever it is. Yeah. And, the worst thing that happens on Twitter is you put something and then it's for people to misinterpret what you say. Yeah. And then you've only got so many characters to reply and you end up in this sort of mess where you're asking somebody when actually you're both you both got the same point, just putting it a different way. So it's great to be able to come on and talk and just sort of maybe put a bit of weight behind what I'm trying to say on Twitter. I've been building this up as what I've been calling a heel turn because generally I'm quite positive. I think as a fan, I'm not overly negative. I like to think I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't get too But really recently, I just found myself more siding with the people I don't usually side with on Twitter, which is very alien to me. So the people that I sometimes see that tweet negatively all the time, and I find myself being annoyed by them, I've suddenly found myself thinking, they've got a point about this. And so that was what I was building up, saying it was like a heel turn. I was just hit Randy Savage with a chair and joined the bad guys for a bit. It's true what they say. It's quite cool to be a bad guy sometimes. I don't mind soaking up a bit of criticism on the tweets and stuff, because if we all blindly back the manager and we just keep losing and losing and losing, it's going to achieve nothing.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard sometimes to say things that are going to be like that, that are going to be unpopular, and try to put them in a way that doesn't come across just as being, it's not a hot take, right? You're not interested in that. I don't think you're doing that. I think. Yeah,
it's not a personal. It's not a personal attack on Ralph Hasenhüttl. I don't have anything against him personally. I think every manager should be open to the same criticisms as any other. And for some reason, he doesn't get criticised for the things that other managers we've previously had did get criticised for. Mm-hmm. And I find that just a bit unfair. So I almost find myself intentionally fighting back against. And that's not because I want to wind people up as such, but sometimes I find the unnecessary, over the top level of support a bit confusing, I guess, because he's just another man that's managing the football club. We've had so many in the past. We've had so many in the past that some have been good, some have been bad, and what they've all consistently had is the same sort of level of analysis on them, and the same, and been criticised. If they have a bad run, they get criticised. If they have a good run, they get praised. Ralph Hasenhüttl seems to be, although I think it is slowly changing, but he has been in this bubble where you're allowed to praise him, but if you criticise him, you're seen as some sort of naysayer, bad guy, and that shouldn't be the case, because as soon as anyone, it'll be the same with a world leader, a president or a prime minister or whatever. As soon as it becomes you're not allowed to criticise them, then you're in some sort of weird dictatorship,
right?
And that shouldn't be allowed, And perhaps the way Saints need to make changes is to look at whether the relationship between Martin Semmens and Ralph Hasenhüttl was actually healthy from a business point of view, or is this a guy, they're such good friends that Ralph is, as the Telegraph put it, got the safest job in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Which cannot be healthy, and no matter how anyone looks at it, that can't be a healthy situation.
No. There's. I think it's one thing to come out after the first 9-0 and tell them, we'll give you time to fix this, or let's fix this or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's different to just go to not have any. I guess if there's just no chance that you're going to lose your job, if I could show up and not teach kids for a year on end and just sit in class and just go like, you're not going to fire me. Like, that's not good for anybody,
I think he's probably benefiting from the fact that Gal doesn't give a shit. because if Gal cared, he would probably be phoning Martin Semmens up and saying, why is this guy still the coach?
Yeah.
We're losing every week. I don't want to get relegated.
Yeah.
Get rid of him. But I think Gal literally couldn't care less.
Yeah.
So, that Semmens is running the club, and I'm not criticising Martin Semmens as such. I don't think he's doing a bad job running the club. But if him and Ralph are too pally, that becomes a situation where it's too awkward for him to fire him.
Yeah.
And that isn't, we shouldn't have that. I don't know if you've watched the Tottenham documentary on Amazon Prime.
I did.
All or Nothing. Yeah. So if you see in that, Pochettino and Daniel Levy are supposed to be quite pally, but when the axe had to be wielded, Daniel Levy did it without question.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, perhaps we haven't got someone as ruthless as that in charge. And I'm not saying I want someone like Daniel Levy, because I don't. But there has to be a happy medium somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just want to say thanks again, man. Like, this has been great. It's been nice just to catch up with you, and then add the podcast on top of it, and it's been quite good. Hopefully, dog and kids in the background haven't been too much, but. If people want to follow you on Twitter, it's @CRStig. The link, of course, is in the show notes. for people that don't already, although I assume maybe, I don't know. I assume people, if you're listening to this, they probably already follow you, but it's been a pleasure. And congratulations on being back in the UK, back closer home. You're not all the way on the Isle of Wight, but you're closer than you were. So hopefully.
No, I'm in Southampton, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Actually in Southampton now, which is a happy coincidence that sort of wasn't planned, but has happened. So when they open the stadium, I can be there giving my opinion a bit more openly.
I look forward to that, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Yeah, it's been great, mate. Thanks.
And that does it for this week's episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Chris Rann. You can find on Twitter @CRStig. There's a link to that in the show notes. And even if you are not one of the people that's going to agree with his views on the situation, remember that we're all fans of the club. We all want the same thing for the club. We want the club to be successful. We just have different ideas about how that may actually happen. Some people want Ralph to go. Some people want Gao to go. Some people want everything to stay the same. Some people want new players. We have lots of issues around the club, but just remember that we are all fans. We all want the same thing. So try to stick together, as hard as it is sometimes. I don't like listening to everybody's opinion either. I challenge myself and you to do that, or just mute them, and then you don't have to listen. If you are planning on coming back and not muting this show, you can do that by visiting SouthamptonDellivery.com. There you can find links to listen in whatever podcast app you use. And you can also share the show so you can send it to somebody else who you think may actually enjoy it. The partners of the show make this thing possible, so thank you to the Southampton page on Twitter and the Saints Archive, which you can follow on Twitter, Instagram, and join their group on Facebook to help you connect with fans, staff, and players from the Southampton Football Club. The show's logo is done by Matt Beeling of the We Are Southampton page on Instagram. All music comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you listen to right now is Aim is True by Huntington Bear. Special shout out to all the patrons of the show. You get extra episodes, but you also make sure the show stays on the air, and I appreciate that. So that does it for this week. We'll be back next time, and until then, remember, together, march on.